speak. So I'm going to hit record. So you'll get a request to acknowledge that. And I know we may have people joining us as we go, but given our time plan, I'd like to go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Anne Marie Slobig. I chair the clinical psychology doctoral program at the Chicago School in Chicago. And today I've invited 3 of our alumni who have varied careers to talk a little bit about the work they do and their training and their preparation to do that work and just what they like about it. Kind of as I was just saying before we started, to expand people's awareness of sort of what's possible and what people are doing. What I'd like to do is have each of our panelists introduce themselves briefly and talk a little bit about your work, your brief description of your career, and maybe say something about what you are enjoying about the work you're doing now. And then we'll have a discussion about sort of the trajectory of your career and some of the decision points you faced. It'll be a fairly relaxed conversation, I think. I'll encourage you to just jump in and take, we don't have to be taking specific turns. If you want to say something to play off what anybody else says, please just jump in. And then my hope is that we'll have some time if there's any questions from anyone attending. And so let's go ahead and get started. Dr. Baker, want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is Dr. Baker, but I prefer Dr. Kim. First, thank you, Dr. Slowbig. Am I pronouncing that right?
You are.
Dr.
That's
Slowbig.
correct.
It's easier to say Anne Marie, but I'll be
That's
politically
fine.
correct.
Either is
Thank
fine.
you
I
so.
answered to both.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me to this. This is really exciting. It's really cool to be able to talk to students at the school where I graduated. The School means a lot to me, so thank you for this opportunity. So I'm Dr. Kim. I am the CEO of KB Psychological Practice. And I have a group of counselors, social workers, and psychologists, and we go out to long-term care communities in Illinois, mostly the western suburban area, and we provide psychotherapy for them. Um, Older adults are a forgotten population. They're very undertreated, undernoticed, and it's really cool to be able to provide this service for them. Most times free of charge because Medicare will reimburse for it. So we travel to different communities, we meet the residents where they are, and we perform psychotherapy right there. I also have a virtual program that I started during COVID, like most of us did. But my program was a little different. I started it for caregivers and family members of the residents at the long-term care communities because we couldn't get in to see them and neither could they, the family members. And the caregivers were there like round the clock and we knew that they were stressed. So we sort of provided the service for them and it was really cool. Um, and what else? What else? Oh, I'm also a part of the IPA. I am the women's section chair, and I'm also a member of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force. What else am I doing?
And
Yeah,
IPA is the Illinois Psychological Association for those
yes,
who wouldn't know that. That's
yes. And I think that's it.
great. Thank you very much. Dr. Daniels?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I too am, yeah, big fan of the Chicago School and appreciated that as part of my training and education. Yeah, I'm Dr. Brian Daniels, a clinical psychologist and therapeutic consultant. I'm located just next to Boulder, Colorado, and currently done a handful of things over my career, and maybe we can dive into that in a bit. But currently, I maintain a small private practice, primarily working with teenagers and young adults and their families. A lot of the clients that I get referred to me and that I work with, and just some of my expertise, have pretty complex developmental trauma and attachment issues, and a lot of them have also been in higher levels of care for mental health treatment and are now returning back to the Boulder or Denver area and working with them and their families on kind of reintegrating and stepping back into life and school back in the community. So that's a lot of currently what I'm doing. And then therapeutic consulting, in short, is similar to that. So it's where I take on a different role, not as a therapist or clinician, but more as an advocate and like liaison for the family navigating different higher levels of care, whether that's hospitalizations or therapeutic boarding schools, wilderness therapy programs, residential programs, helping them kind of understand what to expect or how to really understand what all those entail and what that looks like and finding the best fit and treatment for that usually a teenager and their family. And I get those clients from around the Boulder, Denver area, but work with programs all around the country for that specifically. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm currently doing. And I really enjoy, I'll keep this short. I could probably speak for a while, but I really enjoy doing a few different things at the same time. And I think that's been nice as a psychologist. Just brain personality wise, I like doing a lot of different stuff at the same. Yeah. So that's been a good balance of work too. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a very common report from psychologists about the appeal of their roles. Like I can speak for myself, sure. It also
Mhm.
that while it was never my intention to be an administrator of all things, not even a faculty member, honestly, really, I didn't aspire to this. But I love my job. I love what I do, but I also love that I have an opportunity to see patients and have that
Mhm.
part of my still use that part of my training and can regulate that and keep it the size I want and things like that. So Dr. Cora.
Yes, Dr. Slovic, I just want to congratulate you on putting together this panel where we're all doing multiple things and proof that you can survive and make money and be happy out here in this career. It's super important for grad students to know right now.
It's important.
Yes, I'm Dr. Christina Pecora. I prefer Christina, so not that there's anyone out there to be asking questions, but you all can call me Christina. Currently, I am in solo private practice, which is kind of it's counseling and it's coaching, because I do a number of health coaching and mindfulness coaching in addition to traditional therapy for run-of-the-mill depression, anxiety, transitional issues. Through the pandemic, I became a bit of a grief expert, I'm sad to say, although I enjoy taking people through that process, whether it's themselves or their loved ones. And then, of course, just being the therapist for health conditions. My primary training is in clinical health psychology. So I also take people through their journeys of cancer and obesity and weight loss and all of that good stuff that I really enjoy getting into with people and hopefully teach them how to enjoy their own journeys. In addition to what I do in private practice, I am also the co-chair of the legislative committee at the Illinois Psychological Association, as well as the federal advocacy coordinator, which means that I do both advocacy at the state level and at the federal level. And I can get into that a little bit more. But those are my roles. I'm also a psychological consultant and a mediator, like a certified mediator, helping people have difficult conversations if they want to, really focusing on like brief interventions in terms of that work. So that's it.
Yeah, nice variety, of course. So yeah, thank you. I want to throw a question out for any of you. Did you know you were on this path to doing the work you're doing now? Like, did you always want to do it? And if so, kind of could you say a little bit about that? If not, how did it come about that you ended up doing what you're doing? And anybody can go first.
I'll go. I did not know. When I was younger, I thought I was gonna be a lawyer. Um, and a lot of people validated that for me because I was incredibly opinionated and I was very concerned with justice and right and wrong and that sort of thing. So, I mean, literally, for as long as I could remember, I remembered that I was going to be a lawyer. But then I went to college in undergrad and took a couple pre-law classes and realized I did not. I had two epiphanies. One, I did not want to be a lawyer. And the second epiphany was it was my parents who wanted me to be a lawyer. It was them. They were putting this narrative in my head, and it's not what I wanted. So then I was kind of lost. But you know, it's undergrad, so you got time to figure it out. I took some psychology courses as electives and just literally fell in love with the idea of learning about why other people do what they do and learning about myself too. Because, you know, like we all can attest to studying psychology. You see yourself in everything you read. And that was fascinating to me. And so I decided to stick with it undergrad, graduate school, and then decided to go to the Chicago School. So yeah, I didn't know. But I suppose when I look back, I was a very analytical person. You know, I always thought about things really deeply. And I also had some family members at the time who were suffering from mental illness, but I didn't know. I didn't fully understand what that was, but I was very curious about it. So um, I always had that curiosity and that sort of wondering about people and myself. So I suppose that it would have found me eventually. Even if I did end up being a lawyer, I probably would have somehow weaved psychology in there somewhere. But I'm happy that I landed where I am.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, I can keep the same rotation here. Um, I feel like I could answer that question in a few different ways, or it's like how deep do I want to go to? But I think like on a macro level or like a larger level, to some degree, I knew that I would be working in some type of field with people. I grew up around special education my whole life, and had a connection with that and some psychology work and different things that I was surrounded with growing up. So I think that kind of got me on that path and leading me down a little bit right after college. I took some time off before graduate school and worked in direct care um, with teenagers in Chicago and really enjoyed that. And I think that kind of reignited or solidified a passion of working, in this field, and also realizing that I probably need to go back to grad school and, if I want to further develop that, and found, I think also timing developmentally for myself too, of kind of finding my stride in who I was becoming and what I wanted, and went to the Erickson Institute before the Chicago School and really connected with that program, and with the Chicago School a lot. And so that led me on the trajectory to become a psychologist, and knowing that I wanted to do that. Um, and then a little bit more micro, it's kind of funny, but I got connected to wilderness therapy, adventure therapy, outdoor programming in Chicago. Um, and which you wouldn't think, inner city Chicago is where I was working as a staff, and had actually he's a current colleague now, so it's come full circle. Um, that he came in and wanted to take our kids out to Wisconsin canoeing and backpacking, and I was like, oh, you can do this with therapy? Like, I never knew that was possible. So that kind of led me on that path. And I dove fully into that and wrote my dissertation on that and researched everything I could and moved out to Utah for a while. So, that I think led me down a little bit in understanding specifically what I wanted to be doing, and where I am today, and working with this type of population and these types of issues. And but I don't think I knew any of that was possible until some of that applied work or field work alongside grad, classes and whatnot. But that's where I am now.
Right.
And I can just say, like, resounding yes. I always knew that I wanted to do this. I grew up watching the OG Frasier, and I was like, that looks like fun. And I didn't even want to be on the radio. I didn't want to do like a call in. Like, that would be silly. But I was like, oh, therapist, that sounds like fun. Thankfully, when I got to school, I was actually like good at it, and I really enjoyed it. And it piqued so much of my extroverted like need to be with other people on a regular basis, but not the same people all the time. And I don't really need to be friends with these people, and I get to, like, work with them and get the window into their lives and think creatively and problem solve with them. It was really great. Oh, I'm so sorry. I am joined by a few animals in this one room today. Their dad is still working, so pardon the pit bull, a little snacky right now. But anyway, so that's how I got to be a psychologist. And then once a psychologist, in fact, it was one of my professors at Chicago School who said, once you get your doctorate, she didn't just say this to me, she said it to a whole class. Once you get your doctorate, you can try your hand at anything. And so in addition to entering into private practice, I also decided, like, oh, okay, maybe I want to go and explore what psychologists in the military do. So I spent a year in Korea doing substance abuse counseling. I did corporate wellness with weight loss and obesity for kids for a while. I have done, hush no. I was on fellowship in DC doing advocacy work, but also creating trauma-informed curriculum for international paramilitary partners. Like, you can actually do a lot with that, like the same pathway of private practice or therapy, just kind of like running through everything. So it's been a fantastic career, and I'm so glad that Fraser Crane made me think about it in the first place.
That's so great. I think these examples illustrating like sort of just that breadth, even among just the three of you, or the three of you and me, like I can even think like, I didn't know I was gonna be in charge of training of psychologists. And I've also done consulting. I have a PsyD. I didn't go to the Chicago School, but I have a PsyD also. And I do feel like that training prepared me not just to be a therapist or to do assessment, or to be a supervisor, which is sort of the obvious applications, right? But also to do these kinds of amazing, different, varied work. I did some amazing consulting to organizations around leadership development and diversity and change management, things like that, in addition to just, sort of the stuff that I thought went to school expecting to do, which is what I still do, therapy. But also like applying all these skills in a setting, like an educational setting where you have to work with teams, you have to collaborate, you have to solve problems, you have to do research, all the things you're really trained to do. So maybe could you guys talk about your experience of being trained and sort of what key, was there any key experiences in your training that kind of helped put you on this path or prepared you for, enjoying your work as a psychologist? Just let's talk a little bit about the training enterprise. And I mean training broadly, education and training, your doctoral program and clinical training experiences.
I'll break the mold here and go first. I do think that my initial training at Chicago School in clinical hypnosis and meditation practice, which was not just finding its way. I mean, ACT had been created already when I was, in school, and I learned a ton about it, but the incorporation of hypnosis and meditation has made such a difference, and really opened me up to different areas of the field. Even in all of my training through hospitals and clinics and private practice and wellness and the military, and especially working in trauma, it has really like developed in such a way that now
people come to me for help with meditation, relaxation, and things like that is the skill that they're seeking. And it was that initial training that I thought has really opened up my own career, as well as my own like personal practices that have just made me a better human being. And it's great to see people like, wanting that.
I would say, I think for me at least, my experience at the Chicago School, I always think about this and look back at how well it prepared me for trauma responsive work. And I just feel ahead of that, or that I got a really good breadth of knowledge and experience, and in the classroom, but also alongside the practica that I was able to be a part of, and experiences that I had, incredibly challenging and hard. And I remember just being exhausted, and but at the same time that I'm so appreciative of having those experiences. And I'd also say the mentorship of my research like clerkship chair that I had, who's still there, and I love him, and my dissertation
We all do.
chair, right? And they were just, I think it was just a good example of practicing what the Chicago School preaches. And those professors and the cohort that I was a part of, I'm still incredibly close with them right now. And that just experience and training has sent me off on like a springboard in that direction. And I would add that just increasing and kind of continuing the trauma path, and becoming trained in brain spotting and EMDR and internal family systems. All of those have been incredibly helpful along the way too. And just, yeah, I think the marriage between the academic part and the clinical application part of it, my experience was huge.
My mouse just decided it didn't want to work there for a second. Sorry about that. Um, when I think about the question that you asked, I'm thinking more about my personal experience of graduate school. I went to the Chicago School when we were still in the Dearborn building. I believe my cohort, our cohort, we had 1 year there, and then we moved over to the Chicago School on Wells Street. And I remember feeling incredibly anxious, intimidated, worried, feeling inferior, all of those things. When I was surprised that I even got into the Chicago School, because it was, the requirements and the GRE and the interview and all of that, and just seeing all of these incredibly smart people, in one building was very intimidating to me. I was that type of person. Um, but in the first year, my cohort, a lot of us felt that same way, but it was the professors, like how warm they were, how welcoming they were, how it's like I got to see how you can be incredibly successful, but also a human being at the same time. And even though you have made it this far, you can still look down and see a person who's just starting out and have empathy for them and compassion. And and that stuck with me. And that was my experience the entire time that I was at the Chicago School. um and now, when I'm out there now, my gosh, it's been almost 20 years, I think. Holy moly, it's been almost 20 years since I've graduated, and I'm no longer, I always feel like I'm an early career professional. I promise, I just feel that way, but I'm not. And when young psychologists come to me and talk to me, and they're looking at me as though I am just this, and it's like, I'm not, I'm not, but I know how they feel. And it's really cool to be able to sort of share the compassion that I got, with them, to help them feel comfortable, to help them to keep going, because if it's too hard, they might quit, and I wouldn't want that, you know. And so, and even in my not my supervisory role, but I manage therapists under me, even them, you know, my managing style I got as the results of the way that I was treated at the Chicago school. Like, just my whole sort of career personality I attribute to the wonderful experience that I had at the Chicago school, and the faculty and all the staff, and how everybody was just created this sense of belongingness and inclusiveness. And doesn't matter what your background was, doesn't matter, nothing mattered. We were all, you know, going forward with one sort of mission, and that was to help people. And everybody, we in this together, we're gonna help each other to get to that point. And that has stuck with me, and I'll never forget that.
I'm curious about, I'm thinking about I appreciate those comments, especially about the culture we're creating, because we certainly aspire to that. I wasn't here when you trained. I've been here only 5 years, but obviously, I mean, we want students to come in and feel taken care of, feel supported, feel like they belong, and that we want them to be successful, even when there's hiccups. Their life happens. When you go to graduate school, you're a grown up, you have grown up problems sometimes, and we have disruptions that come about. And I feel like we spend a lot of time trying to remind students that we know that life isn't perfect, and they're not fully formed, we're not fully formed, that we want students to tell us if something's going on, so we can try to help them figure out what's the way to handle it. Does it require time off? Does it require an accommodation? Does it require rethinking the timeline, whatever the potential answers are, that it's okay to open up those conversations about needing support and needing help. I'm curious about your thoughts, like looking back on what it was like to be a grad student. I'm sort of like kind of dovetailing from where you left off, Kim. Um, I wonder, do you have any advice for prospective graduate students seeking out a program, or grad students who are already in the program? Just being in that place at this point in their career. Do any of you have advice you'd like to share?
Okay, I'll go. I have lots of advice. How much time we got?
Take your time.
The one thing that I will say, and it's advice I'm giving because I didn't quite take it myself. I wish I had have taken this advice, is to find a mentor. And there are plenty of them at the Chicago School, but they don't have to be at the Chicago School. But find someone who preferably is a psychologist, who you can go to and have a lifelong mentorship friendship with, so that as you're going through various stages of your training, so then there's schoolwork, there's training, there's practicums, there's internships, there's postdoc, there's getting a job for the first time, there's deciding if you want to open up a private practice, there's the business part, there's all these different things that, because we have, I can't remember which one of you said it, but we have so many options, there's so many different things that we can do in this career. You need to be able to find somebody to talk to about all your thoughts and ideas about that, so that they can direct you into what would be best for you. I sort of luckily, I fell into geriatrics. That was not what I thought I wanted to do at all. I fell into it because after I graduated and got licensed, I couldn't get a job. I mean, that's a true story. I couldn't get a job. I applied to so many I also didn't know exactly what area I wanted to go to. I wasn't quite, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just applied to a bunch of jobs. And the only place that called me back was a place that I didn't even apply. It was a geriatric psychology group. And they were looking for someone to do neuropsych evals and therapy with older adults, none of which I had any experience in. None. But I thought about it, should I do this? I don't have any experience. But anyway, getting back to the mentorship, I'm going off. A mentor can help you to hone in on your specific skill set and find your lane, help you find your lane. And I wish I had that beforehand, because I felt like I was kind of swimming blind. I didn't know what I was doing. So that's one. If we get a chance for me to come back around, I have plenty more.
I'm so surprised that it was difficult to get a job just because that is not our experience right now. I feel like the demand is so intense for psychology.
This was, I graduated in 2008.
Okay.
I got licensed in 2009.
Yeah, the culture.
Pretty sure the it was flooded, it was saturated. So
Not anymore. But go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to echo the mentor and finding somebody. I was fortunate enough to have a family friend from when I was little that was a clinical psychologist, and kind of in the shadows the whole way through, and I could run ideas off her. So I think that, the question was about advice, right?
Yeah.
So bring me back a little. Yeah, I think that was incredibly helpful. I mean, especially, it's a long, arduous program. I mean, it's long and you're in it, and I think that you can get so in it, and it's helpful to get other outside perspective and not get lost in that totally at times. And so, I think that, outside, I think, again, the mentorship or the relationships that I built at the Chicago School, peer wise and, professor wise, was incredibly helpful in that as well. I would add two other thoughts on that I had is, I think maybe starting, again, this is biased or whatever, but starting with like a wider breadth of clinical issues and diving into different opportunities, and not getting too narrowly focused at the beginning was really helpful. And um, a wide array of potential career opportunities or populations that I wanted to work with, and just trying to get experience in all of that to better know what kind of aligned or felt comfortable and congruent with my personality, and then professionally just what I wanted to focus in on. And I think it's made me a much better outpatient private practice clinician right now, by working with pretty severe and high acuity mental illness before this too. That's one thing. And then the other thing I would add is that I think just by coming to an APA accredited program out of at the get-go, and following kind of the best that I could, and the best that people can, but an APA internship or different things of doing it, if I felt that I was putting so much investment across the board into everything, that I really just wanted to prepare myself the best that I could, even if, I'm not necessarily looking to work in a VA or something specifically. However, I just had that mentality of doing things the best that I could, intentionally with that, so that I could be afforded opportunities or have that not be a hiccup later. Some places that you don't even think about, you might have to show more documentation or whatever, case may be. So that kind of goes into that too, is that I would also add, I would try to keep track of everything throughout your course the best that you can. So saving information or making some folders, at the beginning, somehow organizing things so that it's easy to navigate and find later, was really helpful too. Yeah, but I could probably speak about this for a while as well.
So much advice. I feel like we have so much advice. My number one piece of advice, and there's two parts to it, it's to say yes. Say yes to those opportunities that you don't think fit into what you think you want to do. Say yes to those opportunities that come out of the woodwork that just kind of like blindside you every once in a while, and that you think like, oh, maybe these are only sort of related to my work. Say yes to meeting people and going out and doing that hard work of networking, and be like open to people and become friends with them. Don't just see them as tools to your career. And say yes to things that you don't think that you'll be very good at. And you want to do all of these things to back up what Dr. Kim and what Brian said, which are you just go broad in your training and learn from all of your experiences, because no matter what, they're going to make you a good clinician. But the second part to saying yes is that you will fail. And that's a good thing. Failure is an amazing thing for learning lessons. Nobody learned anything from doing it perfectly the first time. So welcome failure. Be open to it. Go ahead and call it failure, because that's not a bad word. There is always the other side of failure, which is opportunity. And that, like, saying yes and being willing to find the opportunity when that yes goes south is the best piece of advice that I can give anyone.
I love that. I love that reframing of how to think about failure, especially into the context of clinical training, to be a psychologist and just to function as a professional, where there's so many opportunities to make a contribution and to make the world better and to enjoy your work and to meet interesting people and all of that. What comes to mind for me is like my third week of supervision in my therapy practicum when I was crying and my supervisor said, "What did you expect? Did you think you're going to be a master therapist in 3 weeks? It takes 25 years to be a good therapist." Yeah, and then she said, "Or at least 10." So I must have blanched, but I think then she went on to talk about you learn when you do things not that great. Like that's psychotherapy. Like that's the way to learn how to be a therapist. When it goes well, automatically, like when something feels easy, like you're not learning anything. So it was I'm glad I got that early in my therapy training, because I had many opportunities to fail in the wake of that. And have to manage that. The emotional part of that is challenging. And I'm not a graduate of the Chicago School, but again, as a person with a PsyD and as a psychologist for a long time now, I always want to give the advice that people should see if there's ways to take care of themselves emotionally while they're in graduate school, because it's so helpful. If you can get therapy for yourself as part of your preparation to be a psychologist, it's just great because it's a good way to take care of yourself. Like, we should believe in this thing that we offer other people, and it doesn't, I think this has improved over the decades, but I think, there's still some stigma that some students are carrying around about their own seeking treatment, and always trying to dispel that and say, no, talk to faculty will tell you about their treatment experiences. Like, this is some of the, I couldn't do my job if I hadn't had the kind of help I had for a long time, and I'm so grateful for that, because it shaped me, and I learned a lot about my own work that has informed my work as a clinician, but it's also just my life is better because of it. And so why wouldn't you want that? But go ahead. You had some other advice. Some of you had other things to add, so we have time. So, or anything else you want to just talk about and share. We can kind of be freewheeling now.
I mean, I was just gonna kind of, go ahead.
I was just gonna piggyback off of what you just said, Emery, that taking care of yourself, that was another big one that I was gonna talk about. That self-care is so critical. Again, something I didn't do a lot of when I was in graduate school, because I was so hyper focused on making sure I was doing everything right, and I'm saying this because I'm sure there's somebody out there who is experiencing this like I was. But yeah, I was so hyper focused on making sure I was doing everything right. Everything had to be revolve around school. And of course you got to make it a priority, but you also got to make yourself a priority. If I could go back, I would do more things like that I'm doing now. I would be more into music. I would take more time to physically work on my body, to exercise and pay attention to my body, definitely the therapy thing, but taking care of yourself is critical because you have to pour back into yourself. Otherwise you'll burn out. You can burn out over and over and over again.
I again echo similar thoughts there. And I would add that, not only the aspects for yourself personally, but I can't express enough how much that own work on yourself helps your work with your clients. And if you can boil it down to countertransference or however you want to call it, but I think that's a huge aspect that, going back to that advice question, or, if I'm looking back at my experience and like working through that stuff, I think being able to do that, and do it well and really understand that process and have the support of, the Chicago school and the people around me to be able to explore that and to be vulnerable and to be open personally and professionally. Like we've said here, does a lot for yourself personally, but it makes you a better clinician and a better psychologist. And it really allows you, I think, to be open to those experiences, and it's a lifelong thing. And I think that sets the mold, right? It doesn't end when we finish, the 5 years or whatever. But continuing, I think, to utilize that as a foundation and what I know, and that's really continues every day, I'd say, to be a part of who I am professionally and personally right now, is my experience that I had.
I know I came off mute. I'm just hesitant to say anything after giving my all my perfect advice beforehand. But I will also say, to get involved, like definitely say yes to things like getting involved. And that's, like volunteer and use your skills. So for any kind of community thing, I definitely, in my experience volunteering for the Red Cross, for example, they have special divisions for mental health workers, that where they can put you in places that really help people like victims of fires. I got to work with incarcerated veterans and teaching them mind-body skills for a few years pre-pandemic. And so through using your own skills for the community, you get back even more than what you get when you're getting paid, at least for me, because since I deal with the worried well so frequently. So using those skills and getting involved in your communities or getting involved for your profession with like APA, IPA, and advocating for that and making sure that you are aware of the regulations and the legislation that comes down that governs your profession, and you take part. And that can be very simply responding to the calls for advocacy that come out, sending an email, clicking a button, checking a box. Any of it can do that, right down to making phone calls or driving down to Springfield or trying to meet virtually with your legislators. It's super, super important to just know about those things, to take in that information, and then also to do something with it, because it's your reimbursement. It's your money, it's your profession, it's your ability to do this good work that we all have worked so hard to get to. So yes, get involved in that way or in either of those ways.
I'm so glad you added that. And really, as a precursor to that, it really is about you have to engage professionally in an organization in some way, or you'll never get the email telling you to pay attention to some legislative effort, right? So first say yes to, it's worth it to be connected to your colleagues, to be on the listserv, to go to the convention, to have opportunities to collaborate with other people in your profession and make sure that we're taking care of the profession and taking care of the world through the actions of the profession. I think that's a great choice, and you obviously make a great contribution in your legislative role. That is such a big deal.
It feels a little ridiculous sometimes, but it's important. I know.
I remember. Oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I remember when I was in graduate school and they encouraged us to be a part of APA and IPA. And as a student, that just was not my priority. Like I was so worried about so many other things and I also didn't see how it was beneficial for me to be a part of it. I couldn't see, but of course I couldn't see because I didn't allow myself to even get interested enough to find out what it was about. How could it benefit me? How does it benefit all of us? And now that I'm a part of it, my goodness, I encourage every young psychologist to be a part, at least on the state level, at least the IPA. Like if you can't afford, because it's a little pricey. It's definitely a little pricey. They have the student discounts, which is I wish I could get those. Like now that I'm no longer a student, but it's really worth it. I've learned so much. I've learned so much about the field of psychology, things that I would not have known if I had not been a part of this organization. The advocacy, I had an opportunity to actually advocate on Capitol Hill, and I didn't even know we did that. I feel so foolish. Like, I didn't even know that. But to understand our power as psychologists, being a part of an organization helps you to not feel alone. And it can become very isolating after you graduate, after you're out of that whole training experience and you're just working every day. It can become incredibly isolating, depressing, all of that. So definitely stay involved, not only to stay current, but to continue that experience of belongingness and inclusiveness. Very, very, very important.
I think part of that too makes me think of like that, what we were speaking with, like the breadth or starting out a little bit wide in the sense of like, you know, opening doors, and I'm kind of weaving in everything that we're saying here, but like saying yes and being open to things at first, and then it creates opportunities. If you didn't do that, you wouldn't know any the wiser. And I think that it provides those opportunities, and maybe you know you kind of find your niche and you find your path. And I might not resonate or connect with this one, but here's something that opened up because I was a part of that, or I found a group of people about adventure therapy, or alternative treatments or whatever. And I think figuring that out, and being open to experiences, I really appreciate what everyone said regarding that.
Well, as we wrap up, do you have any parting summary thoughts? I mean, we're sort of doing that naturally, I think. Organically, you're organizing what we've said, but does anyone have anything you want to add, or any questions for each other or anything like that?
I think I mean, it might, I wonder if I'm how redundant, but there's just so many
Repetition's good for
opportunities
memory.
that,
It's all right.
sorry.
Repetition is good for memory, so it's good.
Right. Especially as we're aging. Um, there's so many opportunities and experiences like that I didn't know existed. My first year in grad school, and you get very, you probably got some, if we have students watching this or something, they're going to be like, Brian, we can't do any of this stuff. We're so overloaded with all the work. Yes, I know. We've been there. And, at times when an opportunity opens, or when there's something, that you're feeling pulled towards, I lean into that. And I would look and be curious. I think being curious about things and being open to thinking outside of the box, which I think Chicago School supports tremendously, and having those 5-minute conversations, or staying after class for a minute, something resonated with you. Being attuned to that, and trying to take a hold of those things. Yes, there's a ton of work, and you're gonna need to go hit the coffee shop and study. But there's lived experiences, I think, throughout that, that were so impressionable upon me, and I'll take with me, as long as I'm doing this. And I just can't express my gratitude and appreciation for that as much as I can.
Ditto, all of that. When I talk about the school, that my alma mater, um, everybody knows how much I loved my school. I love my city, first of all. So the fact that the school was called the Chicago School, that right there just, but then it was just such an awesome experience. And I literally came there one person and was completely different when I left. Of course, I had not arrived, but I was very different. I was much more informed. I was more confident. I felt that I could do anything, like I evolved as a result of being a part of that program. And I'm sure all of the students, and it was hard. It was hard. It was really, really, really difficult. But I think that's part of it. Like one of you all said that, like if it's not, maybe it was you, Anne-Marie. If it's not difficult, then you're not going to grow from it. You're not going to. It's nothing. I don't remember who said it. My apologies if I'm getting it wrong. But I evolved, and since I've graduated, I've evolved even further just by doing a lot of the things that the panel has said, saying yes to things, taking risks, leaning into opportunities that feel a little scary. Um, Stepping out, going outside of the box, all of that. I have evolved so much, and I'm grateful for that evolution. I'm so grateful. It has made me not just a good psychologist, but just a good person. Like I see the good in things, and I see the good in people, and I enjoy it. My favorite sort of emoji, or my favorite sort of thing, is sunshine and rainbows. That's, everybody knows me by sunshine and rainbows, because that's kind of how I live my life. That's kind of how I try to see life and see the world and see people. And I definitely attribute that to what not necessarily my training, but the experience of going to graduate school, and the school that I went to in particular. So stick with it. You might not feel, I don't know, I do know what you're feeling right now, but that feeling will pass. You will evolve past that feeling. You will come on up a little higher. You're going to keep coming up a little higher. Just stick with it. Have people around you who support you and encourage you to keep going. Make sure you have mentors that can help you stay on, find your path, find your lane, stay on that lane, explain things, and yeah, just evolve. And yeah.
Well, I want to thank you all so much. This has been a really delightful conversation with me. So appreciate it.